Well, one thing I want to talk about, which you're telling me this is actually in the book. You wrote about a few weeks ago. You wrote an article for The Nation magazine about how, I mean, most progressives know this. Most people know this, that the current batch of NSA scandals that we're facing right now is clearly not the first one in our history. You wrote at The Nation about the differences between the NSA scandal of today compared with the NSA scandals in the 70s. So let's discuss that a little bit. What are the major differences of how we as a country dealt with and looked at the NSA scandals back then and how we're looking at it now?
Well, we should actually start with the similarities. It came out of this remarkable movement in which Seymour Hersh, who has broken so many stories that kind of exercised our muscles as citizenship over the decades, revealed at the end of 1974 that the CIA was massively spying on protesters and Americans. And it caused such a stir because people's kind of critical citizenship temper was so stirred by Watergate that Ford had to kind of impanel this blue ribbon group to investigate it. And very soon after that, both the Senate and the House initiated investigations of the CIA and the FBI, and all kinds of amazing stuff came out of that. You know, the revelation that the FBI was spying on Martin Luther King and tried to get him to commit suicide, that the CIA was being involved in assassinations of people like Castro and Lumumba and things like that. But basically, as this is going on, Bella Abzug, do you know about her?
No, not really. Who's Bella Ab? Who is that?
She's a fascinating character. She makes a cameo in Annie Hall that people might remember. She was a very liberal congresswoman from New York who was famous for always wearing hats. Anyway, she was a real kind of New York loudmouth and a real warrior for justice. And she was the one who uncovered that the NSA was basically at the close of business every night of the year for decades, turning over records of their telegraph traffic, international telegraph traffic, to the NSA. Mm-hmm. And she's like, we got to investigate that. And the NSA went berserk and said, no, you can't do this. You know, this is too important for America's security. And in fact, the Church Committee, Senator Frank Church was running that Senate committee, said, well, you know, the president says that, he says, trust me, and this is really important, so I'm not going to do it. But then as Bella Abzug went courageously forward and found out that it was worse than anyone had imagined, Frank Church was like, no, we got to look into this too. So basically what I did for The Nation and for the book actually too is read the report that Frank Church wrote. Frank Church's committee wrote about what the NSA was up to in basically the 40s before the NSA even existed through the 70s, and learned that they had kind of a watch list in which they were kind of turning over all the phone and telegraph traffic of certain Americans who supposedly were involved in questionable activities, but a lot of it was just legal protest. And so the similarities is, you know, there was whistleblowing, and America started kind of looking hard at what was happening, as is happening now. And the powers that be claimed that this was going to make us all vulnerable to terrorist attacks in the same way they say it now. The NSA had went up to Capitol Hill in uniform, just like General Hayden did last year, lied to Congress, said they were stopping terrorist attacks. But the interesting thing was that I discovered was a difference. Back then, it turned out that the year before this investigation even happened, the Nixon administration had basically taken a look at the program. There were some memos in the Justice Department passed back and forth, and decided they had to stop this because it was illegal. So what we have here, the bottom line is the Nixon administration was more accountable than the Obama administration, which instead of taking a hard look at this program and reforming it on its own, has constantly come back to the public and said, trust us.